So now that we applied the app development process to iteration number 4, let's go ahead and implement it. So we switch to Xcode. And the first step is to add a file to contain our codes. You can add a file like that to your project in many ways. You can go to the Xcode menu, click on File, New, and New File. You can right click and say New File. You can click the plus sign at the end of the navigation and say Add a new file. When you say add a new file, you open to a template similar to the one about the project. There are 4 categories. We are with the iOS category. And then there's resource files, and there are other files. So, and then there's also different types of files, user interface file, source files, and so on. We want a resource file, and we want a property list file. So that's the file we want. You can filter by typing property list. And you see the file, so you select the file and you say next. We'll ask you where you want to save it. There's and where you want to group it inside your project navigation. So here is we're gonna keep those defaults as is, and I'm gonna call it quotes list. So this is the quotes list, the list that has all the quotes, or list of quotes. Maybe I'll call it list of quotes. And that file, that name is important. It's case sensitive. So I'm using here a camel case where the first letter of every word is uppercase. When I go to the controller and ask the controller to load the file, it will the name and the case will be important. So here the type the list file is made of 3 columns: key, type, value, and several rows. There's currently only one row, which is the root. There's nothing in the file, and there are 2 types of lists: a dictionary list and an array list. You probably heard me say array in the previous video, so you may deduce that we are going to use the array list type. The dictionary type, we're going to use that in project number 3. It's similar to the array, except that it's not indexed 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, but it has a key to identify each row. We're going to go with an array as the root type, and then use this plus to add an item to the root. So this is item 0, and the value represent the value of the item. The type represent the data type. So an item can be a string, it can be a number, a date, data, boolean, and it can also be a list. So you can have a list inside a list. I'm going to go with a string for the quotes as we discussed, and then copy the different quotes. So I'm going to take my first quote here, and you can use it with the double quotation or without the double quotation. And you can hit enter to save it, and another enter to add a second item. So I'll take the second quote and put it in item number 1. And keep doing that to add all the quotes. Add maybe as many as you want, but at least 5. I'm sorry. At least 5 or 6 items. And last one. So now I have all my quotes. Oops, I added one extra. So you can just say the negative, the minus to remove the items. Now I have 6 items. Notice that the last index is 5 because we started from 0. but they are 6 items. So that's step 1. So I'm done with step 1. Now we go to step 2, which means we go inside the controller file and get introduced to the first Swift code. In the storyboard, let me click the storyboard first. I have a screen, and the screen, as we mentioned, is made of a controller that is invisible and a view which represents the area that the user sees. The controller, if you click the controller, it selects with the blue boundaries here and this particular symbol that says the view controller. If I go to the attribute inspector under, not the attribute, the identity inspector to learn the identity of the controller, you see the name view controller, which is the same name as this Swift file. In fact, this controller, this screen is controlled by this file Swift viewcontroller.swift, which this is the link between the screen and the back end instructions that we need to provide. I want to emphasize something, that the screen that the user sees is a unit that is separate and independent from the file that controls it. However, they are both linked together through this identity inspector. That's where the file knows that it controls this screen, or the screen knows that it is controlled by that file. Without that connection, these two will know nothing about each other. Likewise, any component on the screen that you need to control from the file, you also need to connect it. And you will see that when we try to add, to control the text on the label, we're going to have to connect the label to the controller. If you click on or select the controller file from the project navigation, it will open in the editor the file as you can see it. This is the typical Swift file. This is a program. This is code. Each line is an instruction provided to the processing unit of the phone or the computer of the device that this will run on, and the processor, the iOS platform, translates those instructions so the processor can execute those instructions and display the result. In the file, you'll see it colored. You see something in green, usually starting with 2 slashes. This is called comment. So this is not an instruction, it's a comment, which means that in translating the file to the processing unit, the operating system ignores those lines. What is important and gets it translated are the other, the non-green or the non-commented lines. The first such line then is the one that's coming at line number 9. It's an import statement followed by the name UIKit. The word in or Xcode uses colors to differentiate between keywords, which is the Swift programming language keyword, as well as from the platform libraries, which are the support utilities provided by the iOS platform or provided by you as a developer. If you recall, when we created the project, we could have created an app or a library. The UI kit is a library contained in the iOS platform, and you can create a library yourself or a framework. The word framework is another word we use to refer to a library. You can create those and import them in your Swift file. By importing it, you're indicating to the operating system you're going to use libraries from that framework. UIKit stands for User Interface Kit, and it's a library that contains all user interface classes. And there is another library called Foundation, which is imported by default, so you do not need to import it yourself. My editor has some specifications. I have a different size, and I have line numbers, and I have this ribbon to fold or to group different sections. You can access that by going to the Xcode menu, the Xcode, and go to Preferences. And in the Preferences, you can go to Fonts and Colors, and you have different themes for the font and color. You can also go to Text Editing and check the line number. It is defaulted to be unchecked, but I find it very useful. And the code folding ribbon and the focus code blocks on hover. These are important features. And you can also look at any other options that you would be interested in to set up the editor to your need. If I fold this, so we have here two main lines of instructions. The first one is the import, which imports into your Swift program libraries and frameworks that others have done. And then class. The keyword class defines a software unit. As you can see here, it has a body, it has a beginning and an end and something in between. So it's like a container. The class is like a container that contains instructions of memory allocations or functions, which are other software units or modules or containers. I call class a software module. The class is the definition of a data type. We talked in previous video about data types, so that's how you create a definition for a data type. So the class defines a unit or an entity, a software entity. The name of that entity comes after the keyword class. So the entity we're defining here is called the view controller. That entity contains then instructions. If you want to use that entity, you use that name. So who is using that entity is the storyboard. So the storyboard is using that entity as its controller. And thus an instance of that definition is being created by the operating system and provided to that screen for usage as a controller in that identity inspector. So what is contained in that entity? Before I go into the containment of that entity is not made of scratch. That entity is built on top of a library entity called UIViewController. That is what this column is for. This column means that the class I'm creating, the software entity or the software unit I am creating, I am building it on top of or inheriting from or extending the contents of another entity. So that name that follows UIViewController, this is an entity. If you look here in the quick help, it says in the declaration, class UIViewController. So this is another class. So you can create your own class, your own software entity from another class or based on another class, on top of another class, extending the definition of another class. Who created UIViewController? This comes in the UI kit. It's a member of the UI kit created by the developers of the iOS platform. So this has all the capabilities of managing and connecting to the screen, so you do not have to worry about it, and you need to worry only on the ones you have. Like what connections, like the view did load. When the screen loads, the screen is already connected to this class, so when the screen loads, there's an event that is triggered and then the operating system identifies that event and notifies that function viewDidLoad. All of what I said is already built in by default from the fact that we extended the UIViewController. And this is what the word override here means, that this viewDidLoad exists in the UIViewController and we're overriding it. There's another one, did receive memory warning, which is comes with the event if the app receives a memory warning, and it is also part of the UIViewController. So by extending a library class, I give my own class capabilities from the library, so I don't have to redo it or repeat it. And that is really what made us able to teach an iOS development class as a beginner level for someone who does not have any background of computer science or computer engineering or any of that. So now that we are here, this is called a class. The class contains other units, and we have two units that the template created for us. These were created by the single view template that we used when we created the project. It has a function. Here's the keyword function. That's the name of the unit. So we now introduce the unit class. The unit class, it's a software unit, and the unit function, which is another software unit. A class contains function. A function contains instructions. So here is one instruction that says super dot viewDidLoad, and you see super is colored with the same color as class and import and function, which suggests that it's a keyword, and it is a keyword. It refers to this class that we inherited, and the dot is called the dot operator, which allow you to access members of another unit, and one of those members is the viewDidLoad. This line is basically saying execute the content of the viewDidLoad that is defined in the class reference by super, which is the UIViewController. Basically, I want to run any original instructions the creators of the iOS platform wanted us to run before we run any setup on our own. Then now this viewDidLoad is executed automatically when the app loads. So that's where I need to put my instructions. So what instructions do I want to add? Step number one, I need to load the content of the list of quotes file to an array object, an NSArray object. So where is that object? So we can create the object. We said that the class contains function, but we can also in the class define some objects, define memory locations, define storage in memory. So to define the memory, we use the keyword var. It says here Swift variable declaration. And then you give it a name. So I will call it quotes. And then you give it a type. Use a colon to give it a type. So I'm going to say it is the type NSArray. And then you have to either initialize it or you use an exclamation mark to say I do not want to initialize it, and no space. So this is called a definition or a variable declaration or definition, where we defined that we want the operating system or give instruction. In other words, we can say this is an instruction to the processor to allocate storage for data of type NSArray and give it a reference name of quotes. That's what this line is about. So now I have the NSArray object. I declared it, and we say that we declared it within the scope, within the boundaries, within the content, within the limits, within those open and closed curly braces of the class unit. So now this code becomes a member of the class. I could have created it here inside the boundaries of the function, but in that case it will be bound only or available only or within that function. So I need to load the content of the file. In order to do that, I need to first give my controller access to the folder that contains the app, and we use that. We do that with something for the bundle. So I will step 1.1. I will create a reference to the app main bundle. So I'll say let is another keyword that allow you to allocate storage for data that are constant, that will not change. And I'm gonna call it app bundle. So this is the name of the storage that will be allocated, and the type of that bundle would be NS bundle or bundle equal, and then we call on the bundle and say give us the main, and the main here is a variable that gives us a reference to the main bundle of the app. Now Xcode, once you leave this, it underlines the let app bundle and gives you this yellow rectangle, and you see it here in the status, a yellow rectangle with a 1 next to it, and you see it here as well. This means that there is a warning. Yellow means warning, red means error. So red, if you see it here or here or here, it means there's an error. And the reason there's a warning is because we initialized app bundle but never used it. Xcode compiles or processes the application immediately as you type it. So this is why if it finds an error or a warning, it immediately highlights it for you. So this bundle, now I have a reference to the main folder that contains the app. Now the main folder contains inside it the file. So I need to get a reference to that file. Get a reference to the file. So I'll say let file path to the file path in the bundle, the file path, and then I'll use the app bundle and use the dot operator to access the members of that class. Now bundle is a library. See here, class bundle is a library that contains resources that allow you access to the folder of your app. One of those resources is called path, and the path for resource of type returns to you a string, and you see here description. So once I start typing, I see the name of the function, the parameters of that function, what the function will give me back, and I knew it's a function from that M, that this is a method. The function and method are interchangeable. So this is the one I want, path, and then it asks you for the name of that resource as a string. So the name of the resource is the name of the file as a string. So I use double quotation to indicate that that is a string, not to differentiate it from being a keyword or a variable or a library. So I put it in double quotations. Then of type, the type is the extension. So I use the extension here, the plist. And then at the end, add that exclamation mark because there was a question mark, if you noticed, with the path. So now we got the path of the file. So then I need to load the content of the file and put it in quotes. So I'll go to step 3 and load the contents of the file and put in quotes. So I'll say quotes equal ns array and use the parentheses to access all the different initializers of the array. One of them is the content of file. So the content of file needs a string representing the path to the file, and it loads automatically all the contents and returns to you an array. So give it the file path. So I'll say go find the file path from this variable that we created. So the file path is a memory location that the previous instruction have found the file and put the path in that memory location. So now I am using the content of that memory location as a reference to this other initializer to initialize the array. After that step, this variable quotes will have all the contents of the file. So that then add an instruction to load the quotes into an array object. So we completed that. The third step is to connect to the label in order to change its data. So I go back, and to connect to the label, I'll go back to the storyboard and click on the Assistant Editor button. And in the Assistant Editor, it displays the storyboard. Next is a split screen of the storyboard and the controller. To make the screen look a little bit, because there's so many here, I'm going to hide the utility area and even hide the file, the project navigator, so that looks a little bit better. I'm also going to hide the document outliner in the storyboard, and now that looks much better, much cleaner. Select the label that you want to connect, press the Control key on your keyboard, and drag from the label to the controller right before the quotes, like that. And see, it's giving you the message insert outlet. So release. It opens that wizard. We are inserting an outlet. We will learn about the name of the outlets and then give it a name. So I'm gonna prefix the name with LBL for label and then give it the name quote. The type represents the type of the label and it's added automatically. The storage has to do with the memory, so leave it with the default and say connect. So it adds an instruction similar to the one we created. So here is the var, here is the name, here is the colon, here is the type, here is the exclamation mark. It just has these two before it. The first one is at IB outlet, IB for interface builder outlet, and weak is the storage property. If you hover over that, if you notice that circle that got added and it is dotted in the middle, if you hover over it, it shows a plus and it highlights to you the component that is being connected. If you made any mistake in the connection, you can immediately discover it. Now this says that a component in the user interface unit is connected to a variable in the controller, meaning that both of them have access to the same storage. So whatever you do in the user interface becomes immediately available to the variable in the controller, and whatever you put in the controller variable becomes immediately available to the interface. Both of them are now connected in time. So if I want to take one of the items from that quote and put it in the label, I need to add an instruction for that. So maybe we'll take item, let's say the first item. So retrieve the first item from the list, and I don't need that connection anymore, so I'll go back to my regular single editor view, and you see those breadcrumbs on the single editor view when it's a storyboard. This is where you can switch to another file. So I can switch to another file from here without having to go to the project navigator. So to retrieve the list, I need to have a storage to put the list, the single quote in. So I'll say let single quote, and the type of the single quote is a string, and then equal. So I need to get an item from the array. So I say quotes and then dot, and I need to get an item from that array. So I'll say object, and the object here represent the item, and it gives you back the type any. I don't want the type any, I need the type of string, so I have to change it. And the name of the object requires an index. So I'll say index, let's say 1. Remember, we have multiple indices, and then I'll say as to change the type to string. And I made there is an error here because it highlighted this and it gave me the red sign. So if you click the red sign, it says any is not convertible to string. Did you mean to use as with an exclamation to force a downcast? Because any is a generic type and a string is a specific. So going from generic to specific, you're kind of going to small. That's what a downcast is, from generic to specific. So do you want to replace the as? So the mistake I made is I did not put the exclamation mark after the as. So it tells me here what is the solution to my error, and here it says fix it, replace as with as. Do you want to do that? And then I double click and it fix the error for me. So now I have the single quote that retrieves the item at index 1. The last step is to put the single quote in the text property of the label. So step number 3, assign the single quote to the text property of the label quotes. So I say label quote. To access any property or content, I use the dot operator, and then the name of the property, which is text, and then equal. The equal is called the assignment operator. So I hear this last instruction, I am assign the contents of the memory location named single quote to the text attribute of the label quote object, which means that there's another memory location that contains that label, and that memory location has sub memory locations, and one of those sub is called the text. So I'm using label quote dot text to access that particular memory location. So now that this is all the instructions that I need to add. I connected the label, assigned the property. So the last step here is to test. So I go ahead and run the app to test it. So I stop it first and then run and see that hopefully if everything is correct, I should see the first quote, and the first quote is index 1 should be the pessimists see difficulty in every opportunity. So let's see if that would be the one gets displayed as my first quote. Hopefully the recording continues as the simulator loads. In a previous recording it crashed on me, so hopefully this one will work. Here is our splash screen, and previously it will show the begin with the end in mind. Now it shows the quote at the index that I specified, which is index number 1. Notice here in the testing that the quote is cut off, which means that the quote occupies more space than the space the label is providing. So this is a view issue that I need to fix. So I'll go to the view, and I need to increase the size of the view and also increase the number of lines. So in the attribute inspector, I increase the number of lines as well, and then try again. So I resized and increased the number of lines, and try again. And that contains the full code. So that completes iteration number 4, and we'll continue in the next video.